Good evening, America, and welcome to your Tuesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. Just hours ago, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland requesting records from the Justice Department over its alleged coordination with District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecution of former President Donald Trump. The letter acknowledges that Matthew Colangelo, someone we've talked about a lot in the show, a former senior Biden Justice Department official who left his post, joined DA Bragg's office and is now the front man leading the prosecution of President Trump in Manhattan. Jordan has demanded all documents and communications from January 2021 to December 2022 between Colangelo and then the New York District Attorney's Office, Fulton County's District Attorney Office. We know there's been some coordination there from reporting we've done. The Attorney General of New York's office and the Office of the Special Counsel, Jack Smith at the Justice Department, the four prosecutors going after Donald Trump simultaneously. We're going to be joined by Chairman Jordan in just a second to ask about this and so many more of his very important weaponization investigations. But first, I want to turn things over to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head, who's going to join us from Los Angeles with some more headlines. Amanda, what's on the radar?
Good evening, John. Yes, plenty going on from the courtroom to college campuses, and I have an update on all of it. Now, just after giving anti-Israel college protesters until 2 p.m. yesterday to vacate the school grounds, Columbia University is now rightfully threatening the expulsion of students who continue to engage in unlawful behavior such as storming campus buildings and damaging them extensively. The university spokesman said this response by the college is due to the students' actions rather than their cause, and many of these protesters are facing expulsion from their school as well as arrests in different parts of the country, a punishment that actually works better than milquetoast words and empty threats. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump was back in court today. The 2024 GOP frontrunner was fined $9,000 for violating gag orders and was also warned by the judge that he could be jailed should he continue to violate the order in place. And in other news, Republican leaders are rejecting Democrats' efforts to tie Francis Scott Key Bridge funding to the Federal Aviation Administration authorization bill. Although the White House hasn't requested a specific amount from Congress for the bridge, President Biden certainly declared that Congress, thus taxpayers, would foot the bill. And while we're talking about expensive policy, take a look no further than the U.S. Senate. According to new reports, the Senate Democrats on agriculture are planning to release their own farm bill framework as soon as tomorrow. And guess what? This reauthorization that is packed full of social initiatives could total roughly $1.5 trillion in government, again, taxpayer spending. John, spending other people's money sure is fun in Washington, isn't it?
They've gotten to be professionals at it, no doubt. That's why our deficit is so darn large. Well, something else that some members of Congress have gotten good at is really bringing accountability for the American people. Our first guest today is at the forefront of that, whether it's the weaponization of government agencies against American citizens or the very important work that was done in the impeachment proceeding thus far against Joe Biden. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan is the leader of so many of the most important revelations that shock us about our government. He joins us right now. Mr. Chairman, good to have you on the show.
Yeah, good to be with you guys.
A big day today. You're going all in. You want to know all the coordination between the federal government and these prosecutors. Tell us what you expect to find, what things you know about already that trouble you.
Well, first of all, step back for a second. Alvin Bragg in this ridiculous case that the DOJ wouldn't bring, the FEC wouldn't bring, even his predecessor, Cy Vance, wouldn't bring. This case that he brought, he's alleging that President Trump was involved in a conspiracy to impact the 2016 election. And then, of course, Jack Smith is alleging that President Trump, here in the D.C. case, is alleging that President Trump was involved in some kind of conspiracy to impact the 2020 election. The real conspiracy, it seems to me, is the conspiracy between Alvin Bragg and Jack Smith and Fani Willis and potentially Michael Colangelo in conspiring to impact the 2024 race. That's what's going on here. So Colangelo is a big shot at the DOJ, the Biden DOJ, and he leaves and goes to work for Alvin Bragg, much like Pomerantz, the guy who persuaded Bragg to bring this crazy case in the first place, left his position and goes and volunteers to work for Alvin Bragg. We think those are concerns as well. And maybe the biggest news today is this fact that the judge said President Trump was violated the gag order and fined him $9,000 and is threatening to put him in jail. Think about this. Michael Cohen is their star witness in this crazy case, a convicted perjurer. He's allowed to talk. He's allowed to say whatever he wants. But the former president and the candidate leading in every single poll is not allowed to speak about the case. That's what's just, I think, so mind-boggling to most Americans.
Yeah, great point.
Yes, sir, we're with you on that. And I think that the main red flag with regards to Matthew Colangelo is that it's just such a unique professional trajectory to go from a high-ranking position at the DOJ and then to go argue a case in New York. But regardless, do you expect the DOJ to comply with your request for these communications?
I mean, we're simply asking for what went on, what kind of communication did you have? We know, and I think John mentioned this, we know that Fani Willis, through Nathan Wade, was having all kinds of communications with, it looks like, the Justice Department, the January 6th committee, maybe even the White House counsel's office, when they were putting that crazy case together in Atlanta, Georgia. We want to know what was Colangelo doing while he was at DOJ and then heading up to New York to be part of Alvin Bragg's team. We'd like to know the same answers there. So we've subpoenaed information in the Fani Willis case. We're asking for this information in the Alvin Bragg Colangelo case. We'll see what we get.
Yeah, really important. Last week, sir, we put together a timeline from documents we got from FOIA and that the court released, and it shows right after Joe Biden's people found out, he's got documents, classified documents left over from his vice presidency. All of a sudden, the White House, NARA, the National Archives, and the Justice Department started talking, trying to build a case against Donald Trump, even though they weren't doing the same thing against Joe Biden. From the evidence that's now out there, are you concerned that maybe the prosecution on on the classified documents was just a cover story because they knew Joe Biden had a problem?
Well, we know Joe Biden. The elements of the crime are there. The elements of committing this are there. He was he knowingly knowingly disclosed classified information. We know he had a motive. This came out with Robert Hur, where it was, I think it's on page 231 of the report. Right. Robert Hur says Joe Biden had strong motivations for ignoring classified procedures because he was writing a book for which he got paid $8 million. So there's the motive, 8 million reasons why he kept and disclosed classified information. So you met the elements of the crime. You have motive. Why didn't Robert Hur recommend charges against President Biden? Well, he tells us that in his report because he says he's a forgetful old man who'd be sympathetic to a jury. Okay, so this is one of the reasons we've asked for the audio tape. We think the American people should be able to hear how that interview was conducted, what took place, what was said, how it was said between Robert Hur's team and Joe Biden. If you're going to say we're not going to bring charges when the elements are there and the motive is there, we think we kind of need that evidence. The American people need that evidence, particularly now as they're getting ready to decide who's going to be our commander in chief.
Yeah, good point.
Let's stick with the theme of timelines. Back in 2019, that was when Democrats started the process of impeaching President Trump. Then in January of 2020, with great fanfare, they marched over those articles to the Senate. That was the same month that Democrat Representative Adam Schiff, who was a big proponent of the impeachments, his campaign committee paid $600,000 in digital media buys from who? From Lauren Mershon, the daughter of the judge overseeing the case in New York. Conflict of interest, illegal?
Well, it's certainly a conflict of interest. I mean, Judge Mershon's daughter, it looks like she worked for just about every major Democrat you can think of. And then, of course, you have the conduct of the judge himself, the things he said to President Trump, this fine today, the gag order itself. Again, I find that maybe the most problematic in that Michael Cohen's allowed to speak and President Trump isn't. It just doesn't make any sense to the American people. So, yeah, she's worked for all kinds of Democrats, made all kinds of money. That should definitely be a conflict. But this judge doesn't seem to care. I said the other day, when you think about Joe Biden, who has trouble putting a couple sentences together, I think in the end, this campaign is really what the Democrats want to do is they want Biden in the basement and Trump on trial. And that's how this campaign is going to progress. But I don't think in the end, the American people are going to be taken by that. I think they're seeing the facts. They have common sense. And they understand what's going on here. And this Bragg trial is such a weak case. It's going to be over soon. And then we're going to be back to where I think President Trump's numbers continue to go up. He's up now in, I think, just about every single poll.
Yeah. People have processed what's happened and they know what's going on. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask a little bit about the great work you've done in the weaponization world, continuing to press banks in the FBI on why they're exchanging private financial information about Americans without a warrant. What are you learning? What do you expect to learn in this next batch of documents you've asked for?
Well, we hope it's not as bad as what we've already seen. But remember what happened with we had a whistleblower come and tell us about documents that communications between the FBI and Bank of America. And the FBI asked Bank of America, tell us within a certain date range, any of your customers' debit card, credit card purchases in a specific location area, and then overlay that with information about any weapon or firearm purchases they've ever made. And that is like, they did that without any process, without any warrant. We just think that's wrong. That's a direct invasion of people's privacy. And Americans don't think their bank is just turning over their purchase data to the FBI, to the government. So much so the whistleblower said they didn't want to use it. They thought this was not proper. Right. And the FBI didn't use that material. So we're going to try to find out what banks of what else happened out there, what other banks were involved. We know about Bank of America. We want to know what other banks were involved in this too as we conduct this investigation.
Important stuff.
I think the American people would be interested to know that as well. So thank you, sir. I wanted to ask you about an incredible piece that you published yesterday in The Hill, along with two of your colleagues, Nicole Maliotakis and Jeff Van Drew, regarding the New York trial that we were just speaking about. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about that with respect to some very timely polling numbers that came out from Emerson that showed that in swing states, 60 to 70% of those polled said that a guilty Trump verdict in New York would either have no change or make them even more inclined to vote for President Trump. Do you think that trajectory is going to continue?
I do, because I think the American people, as I said before, have common sense. They're smart. They see the escalation from the left and from the Democrats. You know, in 2016, this is great work by you guys, John, with making this public. But they spied on President Trump's campaign. Then it was the Mueller investigation. Then it was impeachment. Then it was raiding President Trump's home. Then it was naming Jack Smith special counsel. Then it was Jack Smith in Miami and D.C., Alvin Bragg in New York, Fani Willis in Atlanta. Then it was the 14th Amendment. They tried all over the country in various states. Who knows what's next? I guess it's the gag order from Judge Merchan, whose daughter worked for all the Democrats. I mean, they've seen the escalation of this weaponization against the government, against not only President Trump, but against parents at school board meetings and pro-life Catholics and you name it. They've seen it for what it is. And so I think they understand the facts. And that's one of the reasons why it's not impacting President Trump's numbers and why I think he's going to be our next president.
Yeah. So we've got about a minute left. Real quickly, there's a lot of concern about what's playing out on our college campuses. It seems like universities that have tax exemptions, nonprofits that fund the groups that are carrying out this violence, they all need to be looked at. Do you think they'll be looking at some of the tax code issues of the people that are funding this sort of hate that we see?
Yeah, Chairman Smith has talked about that in the Ways and Means Committee. We talked about the fact that, you know, kind of three fundamental questions. One is how many of these students on campuses are engaged in this radical activity? How many of those students are here on a visa? And if you know that answer, have you asked the State Department to revoke the visa, Secretary Mayorkas? And if you've done those two things, how many of you actually removed from the country? Because if you're engaged in this kind of espousing and supporting terrorism, like some of these students are definitely doing, and you're here on a visa, you're supposed to be removed. So we've sent a letter today to both Secretary Blinken and Secretary Mayorkas asking those sort of three fundamental questions. How many of the students are here on a visa who are engaged in this radical activity? Have you moved to revoke their visa? And have you started removal proceedings? Because that's what's supposed to happen, particularly when it's terrorist activity and these individuals are talking about, destruction for our dearest and closest ally, the state of Israel.
Yeah, they're declaring, I am Hamas. I mean, we see it on the videotapes. It's just extraordinary. Mr. Chairman, you always ask the hard questions that others don't want to get, and you get us the answers. We are so grateful for the time today and for all the updates. You got a lot of important stuff on your plate.
Thank you so much. Take care, guys.
Great to have you on, sir. All right, folks, Amanda and I are going to take a quick commercial break. Wow, just a lot to unpack in there about the political coordination going on, the political persecutions, and the possible violations of our civil liberties. We're going to keep an eye on all that stuff. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Don't worry, we're going to come back. We got more news to break on this show. Congressman Barry Loudermilk, the chairman of the House subcommittee that's been digging into January 6th, released those 20,000 hours of videotapes. He's found a lot of the missing documents, the missing transcripts, bombshell revelations week after week. He's going to bring us up to speed, including what comes next in the January 6th investigation. We'll have that right after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. If you're not watching the latest work of Chairman Barry Loudermilk and his Committee on House Administration Subcommittee on Oversight, then I'm going to catch you up to speed. Before Speaker Mike Johnson was chosen in October of last year, the January 6 video footage was only available on a limited basis, and you had to go up to the Capitol in person to look at it. But just last week, the committee has released more than 20,000 hours of U.S. Capitol Police CCTV footage online. And in addition to that transparent move, just a few weeks ago, 4 D.C. National Guard whistleblowers testified to Chairman Loudermilk and his Oversight Committee on what caused the more than 3-hour delay that day on January 6, 2021. The hearing lasted about 2 hours and showed why whistleblowers in America are some of the keys in keeping our government honest and accountable. Chairman Barry Loudermilk joins us now to discuss this hearing and his committee's latest success. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Sir, we are happy to have you. And, you know, whistleblowers don't come forward unless they feel that there is something that needs to be corrected about or added to the record. And considering the garbage that flowed forth from Benny Thompson's January 6th committee, I would imagine that is especially the case now. Can you walk us through what these 4 whistleblowers had to tell you?
Well, Amanda, you're right. And again, I'm glad to be on the show, but I'm very appreciative of the work that you guys are doing as well, because just as important, the whistleblowers are the investigative journalists that have been able to be really an extension of our operation here, because we have had somewhat limited resources in the past. We're doing better now. But one of the things that we've seen is when we released our interim report a month or so ago, it showed that we were doing unbiased work, unlike the Select Committee on January 6th. So that gave confidence to a lot of people who were, suspicious that the truth was never going to get out, and they didn't want to jeopardize their own careers. But when we came out with that report, it gave confidence to some people, and we had 4 senior members of the D.C. National Guard. These were people that were in the room during all the decision making and involved in trying to get deployed, who basically came forward to us and said, the story that was reported in the Select Committee's report and the story out of the Pentagon is absolutely false. And we had more than that was there at the hearing that actually came forward and testified to us here in the office. But these 4 were brave enough to come forward, and they put a lot on the line to stand up and get the truth out. Now, they were all under oath, both in our closed door testimonies as well as in the public testimony in the hearing. And they gave us no doubt or any reason to doubt their testimony. And it was very interesting to hear that the delay was more or less purposely caused within the Pentagon, because they didn't like the optics of National Guardsmen being at the Capitol while violence was going on.
That word optics just keeps coming up, sir. It came up in the discussions with the Capitol Police Chief. It came up that day. There were a lot of people identified above these whistleblowers in the command structure of the National Guard and the Pentagon. What's next? Where do you go next now to follow up on what these airmen told us?
Well, there's a lot that we still need to do. We have their testimony, which is the first time this has ever been brought out. No one had ever had them testify under oath. So we have contradictory information, including from the Department of Defense Inspector General. We need information from the DOD. They have been reclusive at best at our efforts to try to get their report, to get the transcribed interviews that they did of certain people there at the Pentagon. And so we're gonna make another request, and we may have to use other means possible to require them to send us the information. We also need to talk to some of the generals there that these witnesses testified that were concerned over the optics. And, we need to know why the Secretary of the Army, after he was given the order to deploy the National Guard, instead of calling the National Guard, went over to the Metropolitan Police Department and did a press conference and then said he needed to work on an operational plan. Well, the op plan should be simple. The D.C. National Guard exists to protect Washington, D.C. These soldiers are trained in riot control. They're there to defend the Capitol. They know what they need to do. And the op plan was get yourself over to the Capitol, get sworn in by the Capitol Police, and get to work. And if they had been deployed at the time that the order was given, now we know that Donald Trump had ordered them to be readied on January 3rd, so there wasn't any more decision that needed to be made there. The Secretary of Defense was just waiting on an official request from the Capitol. So the Secretary of Defense told the Secretary of the Army to deploy them. Had they deployed at that moment, there could have been some lives saved, especially one young lady from my district, Roseanne Boylan, which very well they could have quelled the riots and the violence, in time to save her life.
Sir, and when I think about some of these fabrications, particularly the one that you were citing from Army General or from the Army Secretary, who would be responsible in holding folks like him accountable? I know he's no longer serving in that position, but would that be Congress? Would that be the Pentagon? Because like you said, that was a pretty pivotal phone call that could have been made to William Walker that wasn't made, that could have saved lives.
You're exactly right. And the accountability first should come from within the Pentagon and the Inspector General's office, which, I'm not going to pass judgment right now because we need to hear from the other side, but we do have their transcribed interviews from the Select Committee. We want to hear what they told the Pentagon as well, because if the DOD IG's report is flawed and it would have political bias, then we have an issue. But yes, it is also Congress's responsibility to give oversight to these things. Normally that would be done out of the House Armed Services Committee, but since this specifically involved January 6th, the House Armed Services Committee said, this is yours. You have full jurisdiction on this. And so we are working with the other committees on a lot of the investigation we're doing at this point. And again, it goes back to that interim report that we made public a couple months ago. That has been the turning point, with more people coming forward, other committees working with us, because they see the work that we're doing is without political bias. It's to get to the truth and let the American people know, because they deserve to know what really happened on January 6th, bring transparency and hold people accountable.
Yeah, that's all the American people wanted. They just wanted the facts, and they didn't get it from the first January 6th committee. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of open areas that you've created with your investigative work. We've learned about security failures, doors unlocking, gear left on the ground that people could grab, these whistleblowers at the Pentagon, the new video footage. There's some issues with accountability inside the police department. It seems as though your investigation is expanding. Where is Speaker Mike Johnson, and what resources are you going to need to get the job done?
Well, he has been phenomenal in the support of this investigation, both from providing us resources to, helping us get the videos out. As we started off the segment talking about, we have more than approximately half of all the surveillance videos out there. And there are other people all over the country looking at these and contacting us saying, hey, what happened here? And it may be something that we just haven't seen before. So in all of these, he has been phenomenal. He has also told us, whatever you need, we'll get you. I've got a request in right now for additional personnel and some additional funding, because of the number of whistleblowers that we have coming out and other issues like you just brought up, that there are so many avenues that we have to go down in this investigation. We need to wrap this up. Hopefully the bulk of our investigation, we need to wrap up sometime this summer, so we can get a final report out and then transition to an accountability part. So we're hopefully that we'll have these resources approved here in the next few days, and we can get ready to go to the next phase of this.
Yeah.
Sir, sometime last fall, Cassidy Hutchinson submitted this quite substantial errata, correcting the record on her testimony that she gave to January 6th. Can you just give us a status update on her?
Well, that's a really good question, because there's a lot of people interested in the Cassidy Hutchinson angle. This, as you guys know, she did 3 transcribed interviews under oath that told a completely different story than what her 4th and subsequent testimony said. And so, especially now that we've been able to talk to her former attorney, Stefan Passatino, where she waived attorney-client privilege, we're starting to get more information on maybe what had transpired. And ironically, we derived a lot of information between her and Liz Cheney, meetings that went on from reading both of their books. And so we have a lot of questions regarding her testimonies. We're going to be There'll be more coming. Let me say that there is a lot of questions I think that need to be answered from her and from other people, and as well as I think there's questions need to be answered by the Select Committee on January 6th as to why you all of a sudden took sensational stories by one person and you went public and that became your narrative, and you didn't even bother to corroborate her story with people who had first-hand accounts of what did or did not happen.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. Sir, is it possible that members of the staff or members of Congress or staffers who served on J6 could eventually become witnesses in your investigation?
You know, John, I believe so, and I hope so. As with other whistleblowers, some have started coming forward and giving us information. And again, it was as a result of that interim report that they have confidence that we are looking for the truth. And look, these National Guard members, they have been holding this back because they just felt that no one would ever get the truth out. And so as we are starting to get the unbiased, without political bias, without concerning ourselves with the optics of it, as we're just trying to get to the truth, people are feeling confident that we're going to get the truth out and we'll do everything we can to protect them. And so I think it's going to be imperative that we do have more information and more discussions with especially staff members.
Yeah, very important.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
I mean, something that was abundantly clear from the very beginning of you taking over that committee or your inception of that committee was that you were unbiased, and it's been incredible to see the work that you've done. You've worked at warp speed, and it's been amazing to see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, you don't want to go anywhere because when we come back, we're going to be diving into some other hot button issues that you do not want to miss. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break, and we'll be back after these messages.
America, as we approach another critical election, a wave of concern washes over this great country. Recent studies reveal that an astonishing 56% of our fellow citizens report feelings of anxiety or dread about the upcoming presidential election. That's why I stand with AMAC. AMAC is more than a senior discount organization. During these challenging times, they fight for common sense and hope that our nation returns to traditional American values. Visit amac.us/Just News today to seize an exclusive election year special, a 4-year AMAC membership for just $30. As an AMAC member like me, you not only enjoy money-saving benefits, but also the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare advice, a trusted voice in Washington, in a community of like-minded patriots who love this great nation. Take advantage of this election year special, 4 years for $30, and be part of the solution over the next 4 years. By becoming an AMAC member, you're strengthening a movement dedicated to preserving the principles we hold dear. Join me now at amac.us/Just News. That's AMAC, AMAC.us/Just News. Welcome back, America. I just got back from travel recently. Everywhere you go, Americans are saying, I don't recognize this country. There's chaos, there's violence, there's hatred, there's turmoil, there's insanity, there's reckless spending. There is a feeling of insecurity with that open border. All of that brought to us by the leftist policies that Joe Biden ushered into office. We are lucky to partner with a really great conservative organization that benefits and promotes freedoms, those that are protected by the Constitution, but that a lot in America have forgotten about. My good friends at the Association of Mature American Citizens, or AMAC as we call them, are leading the way, and they offer so much. And tonight we're lucky to welcome back to our great show and one of our sponsors from this segment. He's our good friend Bobby Chalmers, the former Assistant Secretary of State, former House investigator, former clerk for an appellate judge. He is one of the most learned guys I know in Washington. Bobby, great to have you here.
Always great. Always great.
I left out one good title. You're also the national spokesman for our good friends at AMAC, so that's pretty fun. Bobby, you're doing some really great work, and I know you've been having a lot of conversations around the country. One of those, what people are really feeling below this open border. It's brought so much pain and harm to this country. Tell us what you're learning as you're out there hearing from real Americans every day.
Well, you know, the irony is, John, I am not an investigative reporter the way you are. I used to do investigations, and yet every once in a while you will actually bump into something that becomes an investigative discovery. And what I have recently discovered, and I have, I live here in Maine, but I have sort of understandings of things that are going out in the world and about traveling. is one of the most disturbing things I have discovered in months, and that is that up here in Maine, they just had a big Republican convention, and I went over and saw what was going on. One of the revelations talking to legislators is that there was this Office of New Americans that was founded in the state. And it turns out that in the state of Maine, the Democrat governor, legislature, and Senate wanted to have put together a taxpayer-funded office which provides complete housing, will provide housing and credit cards and other things to these illegal aliens. And their goal is to get 75,000 illegal aliens into this country, into this state. Why would you try to bring 75,000 illegals into the state of Maine? Well, it turns out that there is a national network, this network of New Americans that is being promoted by Democrats all over the country to try to send these illegals to states where they do not have legislation that demands that you have a citizenship in order to vote. In other words, what they're doing very effectively is attempting to tip this coming election by saying that all you have to do is show up at the polls with something that indicates you live in the state. Well, if you're an illegal alien that's been given free housing, you live in the state. Mm-hmm. If you push 75,000 new voters into a state with 1.3 million, you're going to control the legislature, and you're going to control the Senate, and you're going to control the governorship forever and ever. Amen. So I was in shock, and the only thing that shocked me more was to learn that this is happening in states all over the United States that have Democrat leadership. So I think we need to watch the current, what's under the surface, not just what we see in the news. And what's really happening here is there is a concerted effort, I think, to undermine the election integrity in the next cycle.
Bobby, how do you stop it? Because like you said, these are Democrat-led states. Does it require a lawsuit by red state attorneys general? How is it a foregone conclusion? How do we stop it?
It's not a foregone conclusion, and I think that the citizens of these states can step up and make the point that they are not going to let this happen. The states can also put through, to the extent that there can be an uprising of sorts on behalf of voter ID. Voter ID is very, very important. There's no reason in the world we shouldn't have to identify that we're citizens of a state and a country before we vote in those elections. I will tell you that I spoke at that convention about AMAC and about the important issues that AMAC represents, and there was just a roar of 2,000 people when it came to this issue and when it came to other issues like this. So, look, Americans are hungry for accountability in government. They are hungry for integrity. My entire speech was about integrity. If we don't have integrity in the leadership of our states and our government, we have nothing. And so that really is a wedge issue. The Republicans are pushing hard, and frankly, I think some high integrity Democrats are sensitive to the idea that we need high integrity government. And that means that you gotta start with basics. You can't have people lying to each other and pretending that you're setting up something that's good for the people of the state on their nickel. And in fact, it's against. It undermines their franchise, their vote, and that's a critical, fundamental piece of democracy.
Yeah, and polling shows this is an 80% issue. This is a really strong issue for American people. Bobby, AMAC is trying to get that common sense restored in places where it's running amok. Tell us some of the successes at AMAC. We got a couple minutes left. Some of the success. I know you beat some ranked choice voting. Got some really great things for seniors and people who buy drugs. Tell us some of those victories.
Just unbelievable. I really think what we ought to be doing is putting out a 1 more, 2 more, 5 more victories this week by AMAC, because the bottom line is last week we had 4 major victories, and essentially, without going too deep into it, the combination of turning back ranked choice voting, turning back gun confiscation in the state of Maine, turning back some of these initiatives that are just antithetical to America. People don't realize that, you give your money to an organization and sometimes you don't know what you get. At AMAC, you not only get the great magazine, all the economic benefits, but week by week, month by month, history is made by inches, and AMAC is making it by inches and feet and yards, because they are helping these state legislatures to do the right thing every time for the average voter.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Bobby, I have been dying to ask you about a poll that I saw last month, but this is the first time that we've had you on since then. There was a Fox News poll that came out that showed that with Americans 65 and older, and I'm asking you this because of your association with AMAC, in this poll, they had Biden by 5 points over Donald Trump, 50-45. Now, I know that some polls are meant to sway and some polls are meant to gauge. Maybe this is a poll that's meant to sway, but is this right?
No, that's a fake poll, whatever that poll was. And I'll tell you, they either select their own audience, and if you do all your polling in the center of New York City, even for those over 65, you're going to get a select set of answers. The bottom line is, I will point you to a different poll, and seniors are the ones that are being shellacked by this administration's inflation. It affects their prescription drug prices, their groceries, their gas, their heating oil, unaffordable housing. One of the great stealth issues nationwide right now is unaffordable housing, both for older Americans and for college students. In states like Maine and around the country, some 30% of those under the age of 30 are living with relatives or friends because they can't afford it. The differential between median income and median cost of rental is out of control. So that affects seniors as well. I would point people to the CNN poll that shows that 61% of that very self-selected audience, I mean, listen, a lot of conservatives don't watch CNN. That audience, 61%, says that the Biden policies are an utter failure.
Yeah. That was a stunning poll. One thing we know is not a failure is all the great work that you and AMAC do. We are so lucky. I got to attend the boot camp for boomers last week where hundreds of people got trained on how to be engaged in this election. Bobby, everything you and AMAC is doing is making this country better. Great to have you on the show today, my friend.
Thank you both very much, and for all you do.
Yeah. Hey, listen, folks, if you want to join Bobby in the fight, he's a great leader. There's an exclusive election year special price right now. You visit amac.us/justnews. You're going to be eligible for a 4-year membership for just $30, one of the lowest rates he's ever offered. Once again, become a member and get the exclusive election year special by visiting amac.us/justnews. 4 years for $30. amac.us/justnews. That's a good deal. Go there today. Say thank you for all they do for us. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back, America. While so much of the media focus in the 2024 election has focused on the Trump-Biden rematch, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. continues to build momentum as an independent candidate running to give voters a third option in November. RFK picked up a major victory on Monday when his campaign announced he had qualified for the ballot here in California. The big news comes just 2 weeks after it was reported that he had qualified for the ballot in Michigan. And joining us now to talk more about this is Tony Lyons. He serves as the co-chair and co-founder of American Values PAC 2024 and the super PAC supporting Robert Kennedy Jr. for president, of course. And he's also the president of Skyhorse Publishing, and he joins us now. Tony, great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So give us a tally. Obviously, Michigan and California, and I know that there is a process ongoing in other states. How many states is RFK Jr. up to?
I don't really know. I mean, he's getting on state after state, and I think that every week it's going to be 2 or 3 more states. Yep. So he's really right in the middle of it. He's got this incredible team, and they are going to be on the state, on the ballot in every state. And that's the thing, people should just get used to that. There's no question he's going to be on the ballot in every single state and the District of Columbia.
Yeah, no doubt. You can see that. You can see it rolling in now. Tony, there's another thing rolling in, which is the outlines of a coalition that's going to be the RFK coalition. I looked at some of the data. It's like 16, 17%, but it comes from so many different walks of America, different political stripes. It's sort of an interesting soup bowl forming, and also some evidence that people who haven't been in the political game coming in. Tell us what you see in the data as you look out on who RFK is appealing to.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some really great and striking polling, so some of the things that have been true for the last couple of months are that if the only people in the country who could vote were people 45 years of age or younger, then Bobby Kennedy beats Trump and Biden handily right now. No question. So then you look at independent voters, he's winning there. You look at middle class voters and he's doing better and better. You look at Hispanic voters, at Black voters, and he's getting votes from, all of these different demographics because they all are just sick of being lied to. They're sick of this, politics as usual, and they want things to change. And they don't believe that either Trump or Biden are going to give them the kind of change that they hope for.
Tony, I want to ask you about an interesting tweet thread that pertained to the misconceptions about RFK Jr. And there were a few tweets in there about environmentalism and his stance on guns. I want to take the low-hanging fruit because his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein has been somewhat a conversation in political circles. Can you clarify for us?
Yeah, he has no connection there whatsoever. They're just an incredible number of lies being told. But the fascinating thing is that, you have you have Trump saying that RFK is a radical left-wing liberal and a lunatic. And then you have Biden saying RFK is an ultra MAGA lunatic. So you have to wonder, either he's helping one or the other, you would think. So both of them must be looking at data that shows that he's taking from both of them, that he's creating new voters, he's bringing voters to the polls who have not voted in the past. They didn't vote in 2016. They didn't vote in 2020 because they believe that the country is corrupt, that their government is corrupt, but they're coming out for Bobby Kennedy. And the thing is, both of them recognize one important thing, and that is that Bobby Kennedy can win. And what's really been fascinating in some of the recent polling is that it shows that Biden can't win, that Biden doesn't win with Bobby in the case, in the race, and he doesn't win if Bobby drops out. So what it turns out is that a vote for Biden is a vote for Trump. And it's a throwaway vote. That recent polling proves that, there's a major national poll that shows that RFK beats Trump head to head, that he beats him, by a landslide if Biden drops out. And if Trump drops out and it's Bobby versus Biden, Bobby wins too. So these are fascinating polls. And I think that the Democratic Party is going to have to really begin to ask themselves, do they want Trump to be president or do they want RFK Jr. to be president? That's the essential question, because it really looks like Joe Biden can't win.
Yeah, and the CNN poll really accentuated that this weekend, no doubt. All right, so here's the challenge. I've been covering politics a long time. I covered the Pro campaign, 92, 96, so I get a lot familiar with a really surging third-party candidate. All right, you're at 16, 70% of the polls. You might be at 20 in some of the polls. How do you get from that 20 to 35% where people don't have the fear, well, I don't want to throw my vote away? That leap is the next thing. You've got a lot of time. What are the pathways to get that done?
Well, what's really fascinating there is that there's so many people who I talk to who say that they really like Bobby. They like Bobby more than Trump, or they like Bobby more than Biden. But what they're afraid of is that their vote won't count. That they look at a lot of the polling that's been done, just makes believe that it's a two-party race. So when they see Bobby Kennedy going higher in the polls, when they recognize, that some of the polling really shows that Bobby is such a strong candidate, then I think they're going to say, we want to be with Bobby. We want to be for real change. We want to end these forever wars. We want a border that's safe. We want to end the chronic, health the chronic health disease problem in this country. Yeah. That they're seeing that they want somebody who's going to fight for them. They want somebody who's going to make it possible for them to buy groceries, to buy gas, to pay their rent. And they don't see that Biden or Trump really care and are really going to fight for them.
Yeah. Tony, before we let you go, something came across my news desk and it got 129 million impressions on social media. The Real RFK Jr. movie, massively viral on social media. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's an incredible movie because, the point of the movie is that you've been lied to just time after time, and that you can read about Bobby in the newspaper. You see that he's called dangerous, he's called a conspiracy theorist, but that the truth is that he's a danger only to the corrupt politicians who've been taking advantage of the people of this country and of a handful of multi-billion-dollar corporations. So when you see this movie, you recognize that Bobby's been fighting for the American people for the last 40 years, and that he's going to come out and he's going to smash the two-party system, and he's going to really change this country and make it a country that we can all be proud of once again. So you can't watch that movie and not come away with just incredible respect for Bobby Kennedy.
Tony, it is so great to catch up with you and to get an update from you. Congrats again on the big ballot wins this week, and best of luck to you and your team advocating for RFK Jr. for president. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
All right, everybody, we are off to this commercial break, but when we come back, John and I are going to break down some of the biggest news headlines from this very busy Tuesday. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back, America. We love when we do an interview on the show and it makes news. And today was a newsmaker, from Jim Jordan to Barry Loudermilk to Tony Lyons, talking about the new polling that RFK has. We had a lot of good discussions. Amanda, I want to bring you in right away because I think Barry Loudermilk dropped some big headlines on this show. First off, he's expanding his investigation, seeking new money and resources and investigators. He wants to get it done by the end of the summer. He's going to call in the Pentagon brass to ask him, hey, what up with these whistleblowers? You didn't tell us the truth. And he's going to start investigating and interrogating the January 6th staffers for the Democrat committee. That hasn't been done in Congress in a long time. I think there's going to be some ruffled feathers with what Barry Loudermilk's about to do.
And the continuation of his probe into Cassidy Hutchinson, hopefully drawing more answers out from her. Yeah, I think that. And then taking January 6th committee members and turning them into witnesses, I think is going to be something that is quite explosive on Capitol Hill. And something that I wanted to ask both he and Chairman Jim Jordan that I didn't have a chance to, so I'm just going to ask the great John Solomon. Oh, this issue with the gavel and Speaker Mike Johnson. You got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar and Tom Massey saying that they're, that they want this to be the end of the road for him. You got Hakeem Jeffries feigning fidelity to Mike Johnson. John, what in hell's bathroom is happening up in the Marble Asylum? Please pick it apart for me.
It is a Marble Asylum. Listen, he's not going to get ousted. I'm pretty sure from the head count I did say. Now, things could change, but the Democrats have enough votes to save him, and they will save him for two reasons. Because it persists the perception of what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, that this is a Democrat speaker. Mike Johnson's not a Democrat speaker. He's very conservative. He just hasn't been able to maneuver any conservative solutions or get anything from the Democrats. So if you're the Democrats, you can paint them with that label and you've been able to get everything you want from them. You're going to keep the guy there. There's just not enough Republicans to peel off. I had Scott Perry on the podcast today, John Solomon Reports podcast, and he's like, I'm really upset with Mike Johnson. He hasn't done anything conservative. He hasn't delivered anything. Are you going to vote against him? I don't know yet. If Scott Perry, former chairman, doesn't know, Bob Good said today, I don't think a lot of the Freedom Caucus is going to vote to remove him. I think he's safe. Listen, at this point, I think Mike Johnson may have made himself a temporary placeholder, and that really this will get settled depending how the election comes out. But I think now the Ronald Reagan rule, which is let's train our fire Republicans just on the enemy, not ourselves. I think you're going to hear more and more people say that. And a lot of people said, why would Donald Trump help Mike Johnson get the Ukraine package through? I'm going to tell you what the real story is going behind the scenes. Donald Trump got in there because he just wants Ukraine to hold the ground until he can become president, and then he'll make a peace deal. He doesn't want Ukraine to lose more ground, because if they lose more ground, Russia's going to have a better deal. He wants them to hold the ground until he can get in and solve the president. That's why he ultimately got behind the $60 billion deal. You won't hear that in the mainstream media. Strategic move by President Trump. Is he glad that the money went there? No. Is it a better thing to give him a chance to make a good deal for the world? Yes. That's what the backstory is there.
Lord have mercy. When it comes to strategy, Donald Trump and the folks around him and Donald Trump himself certainly have it. And that is coming straight from John Solomon's mouth. Speaking of strategy, and I'm going to kind of throw you a bit of a curveball because we haven't had a chance to talk about it with Kristi Noem and the admission in her book about the dog. Now, look, I see both sides because I know that farm work is very hard and you have to make tough decisions. This seemed strange to me, though, as an animal lover in general. Where I think she went wrong was actually admitting this, whether it happened or not. Strategically speaking, I don't know why you would admit that.
Yeah, listen, I think it's a fupa, right? They just made a mistake and let something out. The handlers around her should have caught this. She's on the short list for a lot of different things. It's just a unforced error. There's a lot of things she was going to write in her book that's going to be beneficial and meaningful to the American people. This didn't bring much, but it certainly created that sort of controversy that, will take some tarnish or take some shine off of her. One other thing I want to get to, because I thought it was one of the most important stories and underreported today. Britain's health service says that biological sex is a scientific fact that needs to be protected. Oh my goodness, Great Britain is picking a war with the United States and Biden over transgender ideology. Big moment, right?
Go figure, the United States Liberals are far left of the UK. Unbelievable, also not surprising.
Yeah, no, but I think a big moment for news people to absorb. We'll see how many of those newspapers cover that tomorrow. Amanda, great show, great questions all day today. Folks, so grateful that Chairman Loudermilk, Chairman Jordan joined us, and all the great guests today. Tomorrow night, we're going to have live coverage of Trump rally, so you won't see us. We'll be back on Thursday night with hopefully some scoopy reporting. Until then,